Penn State Blitz is back here on Penn Live, and Greg, it is a great time to be covering this Penn State football team coming off a big win over Michigan, and now they have to go to Ohio State. Before we get to that and James Franklin's press conference, just want to remind everyone to subscribe to Penn Live's Penn State channel. A lot of great stuff on there. I don't know if they had a chance to see that pop quiz video.
That's right, good stuff.
That was done over the weekend. It was really, really well done. I know that if you subscribe, you're going to enjoy that. So remember to subscribe to that. Before we get to James Franklin, Greg, we got 4 downs, 4 talking points, and then hopefully the fans will submit a couple of questions or comments we can get to at the end of the 4 downs for maybe a little overtime session.
Yeah.
But it is now Penn State, Ohio State week.
It is.
And just when you think it's time to relax, if you're Penn State, you have the big win. 500 yards on the great Michigan defense. Make it look easy in prime time. Record crowd at the whiteout. But you can really only celebrate so long because now they got to go to Ohio State for a 3:30 kick on Fox this week. And James Franklin at his press conference had a couple of interesting comments. One of them, he kind of joked about it, Greg. He referenced the fact that Penn State's kind of quarterback that seems like he's been there for about 10 years. I think James said closer to 16.
Right.
But it's J.T. Barrett, the dual threat, who actually first played against Penn State in 2014. He's still there, and now he's got a new coordinator, and it looks like Kevin Wilson, the new coordinator, has had quite an effect on Barrett.
Yeah, no question about it. Obviously, the two aren't comparable, but he reminds me, in terms of how long he's been there, of Xander Diamont from Indiana, which is fitting, all tied together by Kevin Wilson now at Ohio State.
Right.
But yeah, it does feel like he's been there for years now, and this is probably the best he's looked.
Yeah.
Ohio State scored more than 50 points 4 games in a row now, and they're firing on all cylinders. I think James Franklin was 100% correct when he said that they didn't have an identity at the first part of the season, certainly not when they lost to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But as soon as Urban Meyer and Kevin Wilson and that staff and these players figured it out, they fired on all cylinders, and it's going to be a tremendous challenge for a Penn State defense that now probably comes into this game much like Michigan's did last week, with the moniker of being very tough and very hard to score against. They're going to have to live up to it because Michigan certainly did not.
Yeah, the one stat that jumps out to me with J.T. Barrett is the touchdown to interception ratio that he has is, I think it's 21-1. He's thrown 21 touchdown passes, just 1 interception. That came in the Oklahoma loss. I think they lost in week 2, 31-16 to the Sooners. They haven't really played anyone of note since then, so it'll be interesting to see how they really have improved since that game. And I wonder, Greg, if maybe Penn State will look at that game tape, the Oklahoma game tape, more so than what's happened in recent weeks.
Probably.
Let's get to second down, though.
Yes.
And Mike Gesicki. We're going to talk about Mike Gesicki. He got banged up in the Indiana game.
Yep.
Gutted it out. Played against Northwestern. Wasn't 100%. Made a big catch, I thought, against Michigan.
Yep.
And James was asked about him. And he's a senior. He should be drafted fairly high. But what is on Gesicki's to-do list still?
Yeah, I think that the one thing you're going to hear James Franklin talk about endlessly when it comes to his tight ends, and any of them, and it's always going to be the blocking, right?
Yeah.
It always is.
I think he started talking about that at his first ever introductory press
I believe
conference.
so, yeah. If you went back when James Franklin got off the plane, it was raining, I believe. Joe Herman was right beside him, and I think Joe heard him whisper something about tight end blocking at that point in time. But no, in all seriousness, that's the one thing they're always going to point out. And he made the note I thought was interesting, that he feels like their blocking at the edge is probably as good as it's ever been since he's been here, and I agree with that. And Mike, he's come a long way. He really has. There's a reason he's going to make a lot of money. I mean, what he does athletically is outrageous. He jumps over Trace McSorley.
I don't think Trace really. I watched the replay of that, Greg. I don't really think Trace really appreciated that. He almost snapped his neck back.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we talked about it after the game. But what happened? According to Mike, he wanted to chest bump, and Trace McSorley never saw him coming. So he had 2 choices: run him over or jump over him, and he chose the latter.
Yeah. Mike is a tremendous player. Probably could have thought about leaving after last season. A 4th-year senior, getting better as a blocker. It's interesting, though, that we really haven't seen anything else from any tight ends other than him.
The problem.
Thought John Holland would emerge after he had a strong spring. Danny Dalton is a name that we've heard but really hasn't done much yet. He's still a young player. And Nick Bowers. Nick Bowers has been hurt. And you just wonder at some point what Penn State's going to do at that tight end position once Mike Gesicki moves on. But let's get the 3rd down. And this Penn State Ohio State series has been played you know, in the dark for a while. A lot of night games. I think the last day game was 2011, and everyone likes to look at the 2014 and especially the 2016 Penn State, Ohio State games. Last year, that was the statement win for James Franklin, 24-21. Marcus Allen blocked that field goal.
Yep.
Play is now illegal now, I believe. The leap.
Sort of.
He blocked the field goal. Grant Haley returned it 60 yards for a touchdown. 24-21 Penn State. They also nearly beat the Ohio State team that won the national championship in 2014 at Beaver Stadium. They lost in double overtime, 31-24. But Greg, are enough? I mean, those are Beaver Stadium games where they had the advantage. Are enough people talking about the game 2 years ago in Columbus where Ohio State really put it on Penn State 38-10?
No, I know, and I think that's part of the problem when you go to pick this game. If you put them on a neutral field, I think you pick this game entirely differently than if you pick it in Columbus, because Penn State's track record there, look, this is a Penn State team that's different from a lot of the ones that came before in a lot of good ways. Yeah. But it's still the fact that they have not, it's been a house of horrors a lot of ways when they've gone out there. This is probably the most talented team they've taken in years. But I do think that it's something that's being overlooked. And also, Ohio State coming off a bye. They've done this before where they came off a bye and stuck it to Penn State. So we'll see. I think the other thing I'd say, Bob, is do you think James Franklin still thinks about that 2014 game? I think he said about 4 times that was a game they should have won. And he said that before, too. I think that one still bugs him a little bit.
31-24, yeah. That was the game where they were down 17-0. Yep. And it was a great atmosphere. Of all people, Anthony Zettel intercepted a pass and returned it for a touchdown. They got a couple other turnovers. Took the game into overtime, scored first, and I think J.T. Barrett scored twice. Yep. And then Joey Bosa hit Christian Hackenberg to end the game. I thought he blew out his knee. It was a great game.
It was.
And he does reference that game as one of the early games in his coaching career at Penn State that really kind of signaled the fact that these guys might be able to play with the better teams in the Big Ten East. Time for 4th down, and I think we got to use at least 1 down every week on the Blitz to talk about Penn State special teams because they really deserve it, especially punter Blake Gillikin. He's got to be on the short list for All-American honors. I think he's the best punter.
I don't think he is, though. I think he's the most underrated player on this roster.
I think he's the best punter in the Big Ten. And speaking of underrated, James Franklin talked about a player not named Blake Gillikin or DeAndre Tompkins, the punt returner, that's really shown up and really helped Blake Gillikin and the coverage on the punts, and that is a backup wide receiver by the name of Irv Charles.
Yeah, we hear about him a lot from James Franklin. I believe at one point he had called him the most talented receiver he'd ever seen. So
he's going to have to walk that back
at some point. So Irv has not yet made his progression into the receiver room the way he probably would have liked to.
Does he even catch this year?
I think he does, but not many. He came in with Juwan Johnson, of course, and Juwan Johnson obviously made the first leap forward. Not to say Irv Charles can't, but he hasn't yet. But he's found a role anyway, and that's as a special teams gunner. Now, yes, he is known for the special teams hole. There's no question about that. But the last couple of weeks, he's been really good flying down the field and making plays. He's helped Penn State really keep in check some very dangerous returners, Bob. And I think that at the end of the day, James Franklin keeps pointing him out because I'm sure Irv Charles is disappointed with what role he has in the offense, but at the end, he's doing a very, very good job in the role he's asked to do and the role he really starts in because he doesn't start or play that much as a receiver. It's as a gunner, and he's been terrific. So I thought it was interesting he pointed him out again today.
Yeah, and the one play that jumped out to me, I'm sure you would agree as well, as Blake Gillikin unloaded a kick from his end zone in the Michigan game, and it had to be 65 yards in the air considering where he kicked it from. And Irv Charles raced down the field. And he was immediately on the return guy. I think he held him to a 1-yard gain or a 1-yard loss at the sideline. That really was a huge play in terms of field position. Right. And field position's been one of the underrated things about Penn State's team this year because the way that they're punting and the way that they're kicking off, very rarely and they don't turn the ball over. Very rarely, Greg, does a team have great field position, or the offense have great field position because they're always forced to go 80, 85 yards.
Exactly.
And I think that field position is going to be a big key, I think, Saturday against Ohio State. That's the 4th down, Greg. Now, the question is, are there any questions or comments for us? And it turns out a little birdie has told me that there are. So let's get to them. Greg,
all right.
Tee them up.
So Seth wants to talk about the offensive supporting players that don't touch the ball like the offensive line.
Yep.
So if you did tune in a little bit late, we did chat about those guys a little bit. But the question now, as you wrote it today on Penn Live, is that did they turn the corner in the Michigan game, or was that a one-game deal that can't be repeated going forward?
Well, one of the big things about going on the road is crowd noise. It worked in their favor against Michigan, but you know, as you saw in the Iowa game, it was really hard to function. You can't always hear the snap count. You got to do some things. Yep. You probably can't call some plays. You got to be very careful, and it's going to be a very challenging atmosphere. And as good as Michigan's defense I should say was, because I think they got exposed a little bit. Ohio State's got some front four people that are really good, led by Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa's younger brother, Tyquan Lewis.
Yep.
A lot of praise for him. Jalen Holmes, I believe, is another player. Sam Hubbard. So, yeah, I thought Will Fries played very well against Rashawn Gary the more the game went on. And I also thought Maurice Hurst was active early. But Brendan Mann especially, I thought, was able to kind of do some things against him. I think this is definitely a confidence builder for the offensive line. But to do it 2 weeks in a row against these guys, I think in a lot of ways, I think this is going to be a bigger challenge than this past week.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. All right, a couple more. John and Jordan, I'm going to combine your questions
for
Bob. John wants to know about stopping J.T. Barrett in the quarterback run.
Yeah.
And Jordan is curious about how Ohio State will handle Penn State's defensive line, which he doesn't think gets enough credit. So I think those two kind of go hand in hand based on how we've seen Penn State's defense when it's at its best. And the defensive line is at its best. Not too many teams can run around on these guys.
Yeah, and as far as the question regarding J.T. Barrett, I know that watching him, I haven't seen a lot of them this year, but I remember last year watching them against Penn State and also in other games. When it was 3rd and 2, or 3rd and 3, or 3rd and 4, the old regime, it was almost a guarantee that he was going to run. They line up in the shotgun and just run. You know, it's almost like he's almost a tailback in that situation.
Right.
I don't know if Kevin Wilson has tweaked the offense enough, or they have enough confidence in J.K. Dobbins, who's got almost 800 yards, to trust him. But I think when the game is on the line or there's a big play that Ohio State needs, it only makes sense that they're going to put the ball in his hand and give him the option, I think, to run or throw. And as far as Penn State's defensive line, I think it's a testimony to their depth. That no one really talks nationally about one specific player on that defensive line.
Right.
Sometimes I think teams use that as an insult or motivation, but I think in this case, I just think that you just don't know who's gonna make the big play, from week to week. Shaka Toney had a really nice game against Northwestern. He did some good things against Michigan, but against Michigan, Parker Cothran had a sack. Ryan Buchholz, I thought, made a couple of nice plays. Kevin Givens, I thought, got a lot of snaps, did some good things.
He did.
I think we both we looked it up. I think they had 7 sacks, and it was like 8 different players factored in the sacks because 2 different guys split a sack.
Right.
So you just don't know where it's coming from, and I think it's only going to continue. I'm really excited to see how the Buchholzes and Shaka Toneys develop in the last few games, and especially against Ohio State.
All right, we'll go one more, Bob. If you looked at the weather report, I don't know if you have.
I have not. I hope you have.
I have. It looks like it's going to be a little bit rainy in Columbus this weekend.
You know what that means.
For morning showers, could clear out in the afternoon, could stay rainy all day. It's going to be in the mid to upper 40s.
Oh.
It's going to be a raw Big Ten kind of day in Columbus. Rain, if it rains throughout the games, it favor Ohio State or Penn State more, or neither.
I don't think it favors either team because both teams have speed, and if the surface is slick, it's going to affect both teams. I don't think weather is really going to affect this game one way or the other. Even if it's windy, Trace McSorley had a really nice day throwing into the wind at Northwestern. He's shown he can do that. I think who it's going to affect is Joe Herman.
Right. Yes.
Our photographer had
buddy
better
Joe Herman,
pack some extra clothing. Joe,
poncho,
long johns, do what Harvey Levine does. It's better to overpack than underpack in this situation. Joe, I hope you're watching the Penn State Blitz, and I hope you're listening to us, because if you show up in Columbus with only shorts, you're going to get yelled at.
All right. Well, Bob, I think that's it. I think you have one little link for us before we get out of here and get into some predictions, so have at it. Another
edition of the Penn State Blitz here on Penn Live has just flown by. It's great. Really looking forward to the Penn State-Ohio State game. And I just want to remind you fans, if you didn't hear me at the top of the show, please subscribe to the Penn Live Penn State YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/allpennstate. there is some great stuff on there. We did a video at the Michigan-Penn State game, the tailgate video with the pop quiz. One of my favorite videos I've seen in the last couple of months. It's great stuff. There's more to come, and you guys are missing out if you don't subscribe. So that's it for this week's edition of the Penn State Blitz here on Penn Live.